Hello, this is Hart Hagen. Don't forget to check out my articles at substack.com. What I want to talk, harthagen.substack.com. What I want to talk to you about is continuing looking at a report from the United Nations. I'm going to critique the report from the United Nations. Now, the United Nations is an organization with good people in it, and I have a lot of good things to say about the Charter of the United Nations, which is a treaty, which it would be a different world if my country, the United States, would honor the Treaty of the United Nations, which says, no member state shall use force or the threat of force against the territorial sovereignty or political independence of any other state. We don't do that. I mean, we don't honor the political independence or the territorial sovereignty, the territorial sovereignty, or the political independence of other states. We just don't do that. So, but it would be great if the United Nations, if the United States were to honor the United Nations and its treaty. So I'm not here to categorically slam the United Nations. However, they are people who they're regular people, just like anybody. They know who signs their paycheck, and they're going to kind of conform their message so as not to offend those who sign their paychecks. So with that in mind, let's look at what the United Nations has to say. This is from a press release from a couple of years ago, but let's get into it. Safeguarding and strengthening nature is key to securing a livable future. So, of course, it sounds nice on its face, but what do they mean by it? And do they have what it takes? Does the mainstream climate conversation, or the people that are driving the mainstream climate conversation, have any capacity to deliver on the rhetoric? So let's read on. It says there are options to adapt to a changing climate. So key word there is adapt. So there's preventing climate change, and then there's adapting to what does occur. Both are important. I would like to point out that prevention and adaptation in the mainstream view are two entirely different things. In my view, the prevention and adaptation are all the same thing, because it is nature which can prevent climate change. Of course, the climate is always changing, but when we say climate change, we're talking about climate chaos. We're talking about just excessive, like heat waves, wildfires, droughts, and floods, and the impacts that those things can have on regular people. So what does adaptation mean? That depends on what is your understanding of the problem and the solutions. And what does prevention of climate change mean? That depends on your understanding of the problems and the solutions. So in the mainstream view, carbon dioxide is everything, baby. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases are the only cause of climate change in the mainstream view. There are rare exceptions, but if you read the United Nations, the New York Times, if you read mainstream, like I consider them to be party hacks, but people like Bill McKibben, Naomi Klein, Michael Mann, it's all carbon all the time, baby. If you listen to them, the only thing that we have to understand is carbon, and it's all about carbon accounting. And in that view, carbon dioxide causes warming. The warming causes flooding because it results in excessive rainfall. The warming causes drought because extra warming causes the ground to dry out more. The extra warming in the mainstream view causes wildfires because extra warming means the forests are drier than they would be otherwise, and this causes wildfires. It's all in the mainstream view. It's all about CO2. It's all carbon all the time. In my view, I have a substantially different view of what causes climate change and therefore what would prevent climate change. And again, we're not saying the climate will never change, because the climate does change over time. Change over time is that's life. That's the world we live in. But climate change is just shorthand for climate chaos, for excessive natural disasters caused by human mismanagement of the biosphere. So here is my substantially different understanding of how all that works. And that is, in the last 5,000 years, according to Vaclav Smil, a Canadian scientist, in the last 5,000 years, humans have removed 50% of the biomass in the world. The biomass means the total quantity of living things. If you go to the moon, there's no biomass there because nothing lives there. If you go to Mars, there's no biomass there as far as we know, because nothing lives there. But on Earth, Earth is the only living planet that we know of in the universe. And the humans have removed half of the biomass in the last 5,000 years. Have we done that? We have deforested, cut down forests. And, insofar as when you take a living forest and you cut it down, insofar as you have removed living mass, then you have reduced the biomass in that area or in that three-dimensional space. So that's what we've done on a large scale. We've removed biomass by deforestation. We remove biomass through overhunting and overfishing. When we, kill whales, when we kill large fishes, when we kill too many, when we unsustainably harvest fishes from the ocean, then we're removing biomass. And we can do some of that. We have to remove some biomass in order to live. All living beings have to eat something. They have to consume something. They have to consume something else that either is living or once living. That's just what living beings do. There's nothing inherently sinful or shameful or wrong or bad about consuming other living things or killing things and then consuming them. That's what living beings need in order to live. But humans are different from other creatures in that we have unsustainably removed through overhunting, overfishing, through deforestation, through agriculture that is just entirely destructive. Agriculture is not inherently bad or wrong. We don't need to reduce the total quantity of agriculture occurring in the world. What we do is make it so that the agriculture that we do is not inherently damaging, inherently, kind of lethal to other species, to other living systems. So what got me off on all that, and that is this idea that adaptation is, let's just move on a little bit. Okay, it says, this report provides new insights into nature's potential. This report, meaning a couple years ago, it was like the 6th assessment report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And it says this report provides new insights into nature's potential, not only to reduce climate risks, but also to improve people's lives. Says healthy ecosystems are more resilient to climate change and provide life-critical services such as food and clean water. Absolutely. It's absolutely on point and point well taken that healthy ecosystems are more resilient to climate change as compared with what? As compared with unhealthy ecosystems. Unhealthy ecosystems means ecosystems that have been depleted or compromised because maybe the living things have been poisoned through toxic chemicals. Maybe the living things in that ecosystem have been removed through deforestation, through overhunting, overfishing. And that's what causes an ecosystem to go from healthy to unhealthy, from robust and thriving to degraded. So healthy ecosystems, what it's saying here is that healthy ecosystems do important things like providing food and clean water. Take a forest, for example. A forest can have things for humans to eat, not to mention other species, but a forest has trees. Some trees have things for that humans can eat. So a forest can, plus the plants, but also humans can hunt. And I don't think there's anything inherently bad or wrong or savage or barbaric about hunting. What's savage and barbaric is when we do too much of it. We take more than we need. We take it in a way that is unsustainable. But forests can provide food. Oceans can provide food. Farms can provide food, and a farm can be an ecosystem. So we don't have to think of farms as being separate from ecosystems. Farms can be ecosystems, and I recommend a YouTube video by Gabe Brown entitled Treating the Farm as an Ecosystem. It's one of the best videos on YouTube for people who are interested in regenerative agriculture, which means how can agriculture be sustainable? How can agriculture be something that does not kill or compromise other species? Anyway, healthy ecosystems are more resilient to climate change and provide life-critical services such as food and clean water. Healthy ecosystems provide clean water. For example, plants and good soil. So according to Ray Archuleta, plants and the soil are one. So we can think of plants and soil as separate from each other, but plants and soil represent one living system. Plants and soil together provide clean water. So what the United Nations is saying here is that healthy ecosystems provide food and clean water. What they're not saying here, that I want them to say, is that healthy ecosystems provide for a livable climate. Healthy ecosystems can prevent climate change, or if you will, climate chaos. Healthy ecosystems can do that because what is climate change? Well, climate change includes flooding and drought. Let's just look at flooding. Healthy ecosystems can prevent flooding. A forest, for example, or an ecological farm can prevent flooding because a healthy ecosystem is a sponge for rainfall. So a forest is a sponge for rainfall. The leaves on the trees capture rainfall when it comes down. Then in the fall, the leaves fall off and they form a layer on the ground called leaf litter. Leaf litter soaks up rainfall when it comes, plus the tree or the plants have roots. Those roots in the ground make for really good soil. There's nothing better for soil than roots in the ground, and healthy soil soaks up rainfall. So healthy ecosystems prevent flooding. Therefore, and since flooding is one of the biggest impacts of climate change, then healthy ecosystems can prevent some of the biggest, most dramatic impacts of climate change. Furthermore, that's not the only thing healthy ecosystems do. They prevent flooding, they prevent drought, et cetera, et cetera. But healthy ecosystems contain water. A healthy ecosystem such as a forest or an ecological farm contains a lot of water. Plants are for the most part, on average, a tree is over half water. It's like the human body. A large part of the human body is water. A large part of a tree is water. So if you have a forest ecosystem, then that forest contains a whole heck of a lot of water. Water is slower to heat up and slower to cool down. When the air is warming up, the water is slower to warm up. When the air is cooling down, the water is slower to cool down. So let's say this hand represents the temperature of the water within the trees. This hand represents the temperature of the air. So the temperature, air temperature fluctuates, right? So, the air temperature is going up, the water temperature lags behind it. And then the air temperature comes down and the water temperature follows that, but not as fast. As a result, you have this, notice this hand as the temperature of the water. The water temperature doesn't go up as high. And then when it comes down, it doesn't go down as low. So what the water temperature is doing is regulating or moderating the surrounding temperatures. A forest, let's say you have a forest here, and over here you have a place the forest has been cleared. That this forest, the temperature of the forest is going to remain more constant. Over here, the temperature of the forest is going to, or the temperature of the not forest is going to fluctuate a whole lot more. So the upshot is that forests prevent extreme temperatures. An ecological farm is going to prevent extreme temperatures because it contains so much water. Furthermore, the forest is going to play its part in the water cycle. The forest or the ecological farm is going to, that's a whole other conversation, but whether you're talking about evaporation or condensation or cloud formation or precipitation, the forest plays important roles in the water cycles. Water goes through a whole cycle. First it rains. And then let's start with precipitation. Start with evaporation. So it evaporates. Water evaporates, and then it condenses, and then it precipitates, and then it runs off, and then repeat. Evaporate, condense, cloud formation, precipitation, runoff. That's the water cycle. Forests and grasslands and ecological farms play an important role in the water cycle, so that, that's climate. We have been misled if we think climate is only about temperature. Climate is also about precipitation and rainfalls. So let's read on. By restoring degraded ecosystems and effectively and equitably conserving 30 to 50% of Earth's land, freshwater, and ocean habitats, society can benefit from nature's capacity to absorb and store carbon, and we can accelerate progress towards sustainable development, but adequate finance and political support are essential. Okay, let's go back up to the top and unpack this. By restoring degraded ecosystems and effectively and equitably conserving 30 to 50% of Earth's land, freshwater, and ocean habitats, society can benefit from what? They almost get it right, and then they decide to focus on carbon. Carbon is only one part of this. In my opinion, carbon is a small part of this. But even if you think that carbon is a medium part of this, why do they think that carbon is the only thing that impacts climate? So I would rather them say that by restoring degraded ecosystems and effectively and equitably conserving 30 to 50% of Earth's land, freshwater, and ocean habitats, society can benefit from nature's capacity to regulate the climate, nature's capacity to cool the climate, nature's capacity to prevent flooding, nature's capacity to prevent droughts. So many of these things are, nature has the capacity to do all of these things. Nature does not only have the capacity to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it does have that, but nature has a tremendous capacity to regulate the temperatures and to cause precipitation, prevent flooding, prevent drought. When you prevent flooding and drought, when you prevent drought, for one thing, drought is bad for human life, but drought is also bad for the life of other species, and drought is bad for the life of living systems that we call ecosystems. So where was I going with that? I'm just saying that nature has the capacity to do so many things, and we have decided to reduce nature to carbon. This is what Derek Jensen and Lierre Keith and Max Wilbert talk about in their book Bright Green Lies, and it's what Jeff Gibbs talks about in his documentary Planet of the Humans. We shouldn't reduce nature to carbon. We shouldn't reduce environmentalism to carbon accounting, because absorbing carbon is not the only thing nature has the capacity to do. Nature has the capacity to truly regulate climate and regulate temperatures. Reading on, scientists point out that climate change interacts with global trends such as unsustainable use of natural resources, growing urbanization, social inequalities, losses and damages from extreme events and a pandemic jeopardizing future development. I don't have a lot to say about this except kind of unpacking the terms. Scientists point out that climate change interacts with global trends such as unsustainable use of natural resources. Well, yeah, unsustainable use of natural resources is what humans do. And it's not just in it, but it's not primarily average people. Unsustainable use of natural resources is primarily what people do when they are able to control. They're able to have inordinate amounts of control over inordinate amounts of lots of resources. Like when a few people, when a tiny handful of people control what happens to the forests of the world, then that tiny handful of people is going to be able to make unsustainable use of natural resources. And when a tiny group of people has an inordinate amount of control over the oceans of the world, then that tiny group of people is going to make unsustainable use of the oceans of the world. And when a tiny group of people has an inordinate amount of control over the farmland of the world, then that tiny group of people is going to make unsustainable use of natural resources, of the unsustainable use of the farmland of the world. And it's like this. And so, and guess what they have? Guess what they have the ability to use? They have the ability to use fossil fuels, and they have the ability to use technology. So we've taken a tiny group of people and given them inordinate control over the forests, the oceans, and the farmland of the world. And we've given them fossil fuels to do it with, and we've given them technology to do it with. And by this, I mean primarily electronics technology. So we have to look at what is human nature versus what is us giving modern tools, including technology and fossil fuels, to a small group of people to take the forests of the world and put it into their bank account. We've given the oceans of the world to a small group of people and allowed them to put it into their bank account. We've given a small group of people the farmland of the world and allowed them to put the benefits and the abundance of the farmland of the world into their bank account and deprived future generations of the fair use of the farmland, the forests, and the oceans of the world. So we have to look at the systems of governance that we have turned over to a small group of people. And if you ask me, we don't have real democracy. We have something else, but it's not real democracy. That's another conversation, but in a sense, it's the same conversation. Reading along, our assessment clearly shows that tackling all these different challenges involves everyone, governments, the private sector, and civil society working together to prioritize risk reduction, as well as equity and justice in decision-making and investment. So my trouble with this particular paragraph is that there's a pretense that it's just everybody working together. Well, isn't this nice? Everybody is working together. And I'm saying everybody is not working together. I'm saying it's an abusive relationship. The people who are in charge, the tiny group of people who are in charge, have an abusive and domineering relationship with people, with the planet, and with other species. And it's not going to be just everybody singing Kumbaya as long as we have a small group of people who are able to have their way with people, the planet, and other species. Reading along. So let me stop there. Let me take just a couple of minutes to wrap it up. I wanted to say that, one thing I'm going to get to next, coming soon, is this idea that's triggered by this paragraph, this idea that the rich people of the world fly. Let's just talk for a minute about private jets and what do private jets represent. So you have people, annually you have this Davos summit, the World Economic Forum. People fly in their private jets to Davos, and I looked up some stats earlier that 20 and 45 were the two numbers. So compare a private jet with the carbon footprint of somebody flying commercial. It might be 20 times more than somebody flying commercial. It might be 45 times more than somebody flying commercial. But somewhere in there, many times a private jet represents many times the carbon footprint as somebody flying commercial. So these people take their private jets, they fly to Davos, and they sit around, and among other things, they tell us about what we need to do about climate change. It's inherently it's a mockery. It's hypocritical. It's laughable. It's really. We need to parody this more. We need to make fun of this more. But what I'm trying to say is that the United Nations is afraid to say anything that's going to offend the Davos class. United Nations is afraid to say anything about the class of people who sign their paychecks. And it's not just the particular people that fly to Davos. This is Wall Street. This is the United States government, because the United States government is controlled by these people who fly in private jets all over the world. And so all I'm saying is that in the climate conversation and in every other conversation, we need to understand how the world really works. We need to understand who is really in charge. And that's something that you'll hear me say with some regularity. So that's all that we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a wonderful day.